Manifestation doesn't become automatic because you want harder, believe stronger, or visualize longer. It becomes automatic when you stop trying to manifest from a level of consciousness that was never designed to create reality in the first place. This is the part almost nobody explains clearly, and it's why so many people feel like manifestation sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Even when they're doing everything right. The issue is not effort. It's location. Not physical location, but dimensional location. The level of consciousness you are operating from determines whether reality needs to be forced or whether it reorganizes itself naturally around you. Most people are trying to create a fifth-dimensional outcome from a third or fourth-dimensional state. And that mismatch is where friction is born in the lower levels of consciousness. Manifestation feels heavy. It feels like repetition, discipline, emotional management, constant correction. You think about what you want. You try to feel aligned. You check your thoughts. You monitor your emotions. There's always something to fix, something to adjust, something to maintain. That effort is not a personal failure. It's a dimensional one. Because in those levels, reality does not respond automatically. It responds conditionally. This is why manifestation feels like work for most people. They are operating from a level where identity is still anchored to time, memory, and survival. The nervous system is oriented toward the past. The mind is oriented toward the future. And the present moment becomes nothing more than a bridge between what was and what might be. That state cannot collapse reality cleanly. Automatic manifestation only begins at a level where the body is no longer living in the past and the mind is no longer chasing the future. And that level is not reached by thinking differently. It's reached by becoming different internally. This is where the idea of dimensions becomes practical instead of abstract. Dimensions are not places you travel to. They are states of being you stabilize. Each one comes with its own rules. Its own speed and its own relationship with reality. In the lower dimensions, reality reacts to effort. In the higher dimensions, reality responds to coherence. This is the critical shift Joe Dispenza points to in becoming supernatural, even if most people skim past it. When you are no longer defined by your past emotions, habits, identity, and stress patterns, your body stops signaling known reality. And when the body stops broadcasting the past, the field is free to deliver something new. Until then, the field can only rearrange familiar pieces. This is why people can visualize abundance while still recreating the same patterns. Their thoughts change, but their internal state does not. The body remains emotionally conditioned to the old reality. So, the signal never updates. Manifestation becomes automatic only when the signal updates. And that update does not happen at the level of thought. It happens at the level of identity and nervous system regulation. It happens when your internal chemistry changes. Your emotional baseline shifts and your sense of self detaches from time. At that point, effort drops away naturally. You stop trying to manifest because manifestation is no longer a separate activity. It's a side effect of the state you're living in. This is why people who reach this level often say the same thing. I didn't do anything different. And they're telling the truth. Their actions didn't change much. Their internal position did. Once you cross that threshold, the rules change. You don't attract by wanting. You attract by being. You don't need constant focus. You don't need emotional management. You don't need to convince yourself of anything. Reality responds because there is nothing inside you contradicting it. That is the level where manifestation becomes automatic. But here's the crucial part. This level cannot be accessed intellectually. You can understand it perfectly and still operate below it. Knowledge does not move you between dimensions. Embodiment does. And embodiment requires something most people skip. Leaving behind the version of themselves that is emotionally addicted to effort, struggle, and becoming. The fifth dimension begins where effort ends. And effort only ends when identity shifts. So the real question isn't how do I manifest faster? It's from which level am I trying to create reality? Because once you reach the correct level, manifestation stops being a technique. It becomes the default. To understand why manifestation becomes automatic only at a certain level, you need to stop thinking about dimensions as places and start seeing them as internal operating systems. Each dimension represents a different way the nervous system, the mind, and the body relate to time, identity, and reality itself. The third dimension is where almost everyone starts and many never leave. In this state, identity is anchored to the past. The body remembers who you were. The nervous system is conditioned by experiences, trauma, stress, repetition. Your emotional baseline is familiar, not chosen. Even when you want something new, your system is broadcasting what it already knows. In 3D, reality feels solid and slow. Cause and effect appear linear. You believe that effort creates results, time creates change, and circumstances dictate how you feel. Manifestation here is reactive. You respond to life more than you shape it. Even when you try to visualize or affirm, the body keeps returning to old emotional patterns because that's where safety lives. This is why change feels hard in the third dimension. You are trying to create a future while biologically living in the past. The fourth dimension is where most manifestation teachings stop. This is the mental realm. Here you begin to imagine futures, set intentions, visualize outcomes, work with beliefs. The mind learns that thought influences reality. This is a real upgrade, but it's also where many people get stuck. In 4D, you can see possibility, but you still feel separation. You think about the future instead of being it. The mind travels forward, but the body stays behind. And because the body is the subconscious, it keeps pulling reality back to what feels emotionally familiar. This is why manifestation in 4D feels inconsistent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can hold a clear vision, but your emotional state fluctuates. You feel inspired one day and doubtful the next. You visualize abundance, but your nervous system is still wired for survival. The fourth dimension gives you awareness but not embodiment. The fifth dimension is where everything changes. This is not a place you reach by thinking more. It's a state you enter when the body is no longer anchored to the past and the mind is no longer chasing the future. In 5D, you are fully present but elevated. Present does not mean passive. It means coherent. In this state, the nervous system is regulated. Stress chemistry drops. The body is no longer producing the emotions of the past by default. Instead, it begins to generate elevated emotional states intentionally. Gratitude without reason, wholeness without proof, calm without control. This is the core of what Joe Dispenza teaches in Becoming Supernatural. When the body is no longer living in the past and the mind is no longer living in the future, consciousness enters the present moment. And the present moment is the only place where new reality can be created. In 5D, identity shifts. You are no longer defined by your history, your habits, or your emotional reactions. You feel complete before circumstances change. And this is the key distinction. In the fifth dimension, you don't feel good because something happened. Something happens because you already feel complete. Manifestation becomes automatic here because there is no internal contradiction. Thought, emotion, and body are aligned. The signal you send to the field is clean and stable. There is no resistance, no attachment, no waiting. In lower dimensions, you try to pull reality toward you. In the fifth dimension, reality moves toward coherence naturally. This is why effort disappears. You're no longer compensating for misalignment. You're not fixing thoughts or managing emotions. You're inhabiting a state. The fifth dimension is not about positivity. It's about coherence. It's not about believing harder. It's about being internally unified. And once you understand this, manifestation stops feeling mysterious. You realize it was never about techniques. It was about where you were operating from. The real transition is not from wanting to having. It's from thinking about change to becoming the state that no longer needs it. That is the doorway to the level where manifestation works automatically. The real transition into the fifth dimension does not happen because you understand it. It happens because your biology changes. This is the part Joe Dispenza emphasizes again and again. And it's where manifestation stops being conceptual and becomes measurable. As long as your body is chemically addicted to the past, you cannot live in a new dimension of reality. Most people don't realize this, but every emotion you repeatedly feel becomes a familiar chemical state. Stress, worry, anticipation, excitement, control, all of these are not just feelings. They are biochemical environments, and the body becomes conditioned to them like any habit. This is why someone can intellectually want change while emotionally recreating the same life. Their thoughts may be new, but their chemistry is not. The body keeps producing the same signals, and the quantum field responds to those signals, not to intentions. Joe Dispenza explains that when you repeatedly think the same thoughts and feel the same emotions, you keep your brain in the same frequency ranges. High beta dominates. The mind stays alert, analytical, problem-focused. In that state, the nervous system is scanning for threats, predicting outcomes, rehearsing scenarios. That state cannot access the field of new possibilities. The fifth dimension begins when the brain shifts out of high beta and into slower, more coherent states like alpha and theta. These are not mystical states. They are neurological gateways. Alpha opens the subconscious. Theta dissolves the boundary between conscious intention and automatic emotional programming. But here's the critical part. You cannot think your way into these states. You have to feel your way into them. This is why elevated emotions are central to Dispenza's work. Gratitude, appreciation, love, wholeness, not directed at anything specific. Create a coherent heart signal. When the heart becomes coherent, it sends a powerful regulatory signal to the brain. Brain waves slow naturally. The nervous system exits survival mode. At that moment, something fundamental changes. The body is no longer living in the past. It is no longer producing the chemistry of known reality. It enters a neutral present, centered state. And the moment the body leaves the past, the mind is free to enter the quantum field. This is not philosophy. This is physiology. In this state, the sense of self loosens. You no longer feel defined by your history, your problems, or your identity labels. You feel spacious, observant, integrated. You are aware but not tense, focused but not attached. This is the biological signature of the fifth dimension. In this state, manifestation becomes automatic because there is no internal resistance. Thought, emotion, and body are synchronized. The signal you emit is stable, and stability is what allows probability to reorganize. Dispenza often describes this as becoming nobody, no one, no thing in no time. What he's describing is the dissolution of the old self that was anchored to memory and expectation. When that self dissolves, the field has space to respond. This is why people report spontaneous healings, unexpected opportunities, and rapid life changes after reaching these states. It's not because the universe suddenly decided to reward them. It's because the body finally stopped broadcasting the past. When the past signal stops, the future is no longer delayed. The fifth dimension is not about escaping reality. It's about removing the internal friction that keeps reality repeating itself. It's about allowing the nervous system to experience safety without familiarity. And once the body learns that safety does not require the past, it becomes available for the new. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. One powerful meditation won't change your dimension if the rest of your day reinforces the old chemistry. But repeated access to these states trains the body to accept a new baseline. Eventually, coherence becomes natural. Elevated emotions stop feeling forced. Presence becomes your default. And manifestation stops being something you practice. It becomes something that happens because there is nothing inside you contradicting it. This is the biological doorway to automatic manifestation. And once you've crossed it, the old struggle-based version of creation no longer makes sense. The fifth dimension does not announce itself with excitement. It reveals itself through emotional neutrality paired with deep internal coherence. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of higher dimensional states. People expect fireworks, bliss, or constant positivity. What actually appears first is something far more subtle and far more powerful. You stop needing reality to confirm you. In lower dimensions, emotions are reactive. You feel good when something works. You feel anxious when something is uncertain. Your emotional state depends on external movement. In the fifth dimension, that dependency dissolves. Your internal state stabilizes regardless of circumstances. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means emotions stop hijacking identity. Joe Dispenza describes this as emotional self-regulation paired with elevated coherence. The nervous system is no longer swinging between stress and relief. It rests in a steady baseline that feels grounded, present, and internally complete. That completeness is the emotional signature of the fifth dimension. One of the first signs is a loss of urgency. Not laziness, not detachment from life, but the disappearance of pressure. You no longer feel like time is chasing you or that something must happen soon for you to be okay. The nervous system has exited survival mode, and survival always creates urgency. Another sign is emotional spaciousness. Situations that once triggered you still register, but they don't dominate your internal state. You can observe reactions without becoming them. This creates a gap between stimulus and response. That gap is not passive. It's dimensional. In that gap, choice replaces compulsion. Emotionally, this feels like wholeness without cause. You're not happy because something happened. You're not calm because a problem was solved. You're simply steady. And that steadiness becomes your reference point. This is why gratitude in the fifth dimension is different. It's not directed at something specific. It's not relief-based. It's a state of appreciation without an object. Dispenza emphasizes this because objectless gratitude signals completion, and completion is the strongest signal you can send to the field. When the body feels complete, the field responds as if the future has already occurred. Another emotional marker is reduced identification with thought. Thoughts still arise, but they don't pull you into stories. You don't argue with them. You don't chase them. They pass through awareness without gripping attention. This is not dissociation. It's coherence. Neurologically, this means the brain is no longer dominated by high beta. Alpha and theta rhythms become more accessible even outside formal meditation. The mind becomes flexible, creative, non-reactive. This flexibility allows new information to integrate without resistance. The fifth dimension also brings a shift in how desire feels. Desire loses its sharp edge. You still want things. You still create intentions, but there is no emotional charge behind them. No grasping, no anticipation. Desire becomes preference instead of necessity. This is a crucial distinction. Necessity collapses possibility. Preference allows it. Emotionally, you may notice periods of silence inside, fewer internal conversations, less narration, less mental rehearsal. At first, this can feel unsettling because many people are addicted to internal noise. But that silence is not emptiness. It's bandwidth. In that silence, intuition sharpens. Decisions feel obvious instead of debated. Action arises cleanly. There's no push, no hesitation, just movement that feels aligned without explanation. This is the emotional environment where manifestation becomes automatic because nothing inside you is contradicting what you're asking for. The field does not respond to intensity. It responds to stability. And emotional stability is the true gateway to the fifth dimension. Once this state becomes familiar, you stop asking whether you're doing it right. The question itself disappears. You're no longer trying to reach a dimension. You're living from it. And when you live from it, reality adjusts automatically. Not dramatically, not instantly, but inevitably. When the fifth dimensional state stabilizes, manifestation stops feeling like an event and starts feeling like a response. This is the subtle but profound shift most people miss because they're waiting for something dramatic to confirm it. In reality, what changes first is not what happens to you. It's how reality organizes itself around you. Effort decreases before results increase. You no longer feel the impulse to do something to make things happen. That impulse belongs to the lower dimensions where control compensates for misalignment. In the fifth dimension, action still happens, but it emerges from clarity instead of pressure. You move when movement is obvious, not because you're afraid of stagnation. This changes timing immediately. In lower states, timing feels off. Things arrive too late, too early, or require force to align. In the fifth dimension, timing feels neutral. You don't feel rushed, and you don't feel delayed. Events unfold at a pace that doesn't trigger the nervous system. This is one of the clearest signs that the field is responding to coherence. Synchronicity also increases, but not in the flashy way people expect. It shows up as efficiency. The right conversation happens without planning. Information appears exactly when needed. Opportunities don't feel lucky, they feel logical, even though you couldn't have predicted them. This is because the observer is no longer collapsing probability through emotional interference. In lower dimensions, desire is entangled with expectation. You want something, but you're also waiting for it, monitoring it, evaluating it. That evaluation distorts the signal. In the fifth dimension, desire exists without monitoring. You set an intention and then your system returns to coherence. That coherence is what allows probability to finalize. Another major change is how obstacles are experienced. They don't disappear completely, but they stop feeling personal. When something doesn't move forward, there is no emotional charge, no story of failure, no internal resistance. You adjust naturally and continue from a quantum perspective. This is critical. Emotional neutrality prevents premature collapse of less optimal outcomes. When you're not emotionally invested in a single path, the field has more freedom to organize a better one. This is also why detachment speeds manifestation instead of slowing it. In the fifth dimension, identity is no longer tied to outcomes. You don't see success as proof of worth or failure as a threat. That detachment removes pressure from the system. Pressure is what creates resistance. Without resistance, movement accelerates. Physiologically, the nervous system reflects this change. Stress chemistry remains low even during uncertainty. Heart-brain coherence stabilizes. The body remains present even when something important is unfolding. This stability allows you to stay in the field long enough for reality to respond fully. Many people report that manifestation feels boring at this stage. That's not a flaw. It's confirmation. The emotional spikes that once accompanied desire were symptoms of misalignment, not power. When manifestation becomes automatic, it feels natural. Life stops feeling like a test. You're no longer trying to prove anything to the universe. You're not waiting for signs to confirm you're on the right path. You move with quiet certainty, not because you know what will happen, but because you trust the state you're in. This trust is not belief-based. It's embodied. The body knows it is safe without control. And when the body feels safe, the field has no reason to delay. This is the stage where people often say things just started working. But what actually happened is simpler. Internal contradiction ended. The fifth dimension does not reward effort. It responds to consistency. Once consistency is established, manifestation becomes less about creation and more about reception. You're no longer pulling reality toward you. You're allowing it to meet you where you already are. And that is why manifestation feels automatic at this level. Not because you mastered a technique, but because you stopped interrupting the process. At some point, the question, "Is it working?" dissolves on its own. Not because you've convinced yourself, but because the internal conditions that created doubt no longer exist. This is the quiet confirmation that you've crossed into a different level of operation. Manifestation didn't suddenly improve. Your relationship with reality changed in the fifth dimension. You stopped negotiating with life. You stopped trying to time it, manage it, or make sense of every movement. The nervous system no longer treats the unknown as a threat. So, it doesn't demand constant reassurance. That absence of demand is what allows reality to respond cleanly. This is why automatic manifestation never feels dramatic from the inside. There's no adrenaline spike, no emotional high, no sense of finally. There's a calm recognition that things are aligning because there is nothing inside you arguing with them. From a neurological perspective, this is coherence sustained over time. The body has learned that safety does not depend on outcomes. The brain no longer needs to predict every possibility. Attention rests in the present without drifting into control or anticipation. When this state becomes familiar, it becomes your baseline. From a quantum perspective, this is the observer no longer collapsing probability prematurely. The signal you emit is stable, consistent, and free of emotional distortion. The field doesn't need to correct, delay, or root. It simply responds. This is the level where manifestation works automatically because there is no internal resistance left to overcome. You don't need to stay high vibe. You don't need to repeat affirmations. You don't need to visualize constantly. Those tools belong to earlier dimensions where effort compensates for misalignment. In the fifth dimension, alignment sustains itself. What matters now is not access but maintenance. This is where most people slip without realizing it. They touch the state, feel the shift, and then slowly drift back into old identity patterns because nothing anchored the new baseline. Not because they failed, but because embodiment requires structure. Stability doesn't come from willpower. It comes from integration. This is why the work doesn't end when manifestation becomes automatic. It deepens. You begin to live from this level rather than visiting it during moments of clarity. You learn how to regulate your nervous system daily, how to return to coherence when life pulls you outward, how to protect the state without effort. For those who feel ready to stabilize this level of consciousness beyond insight, I created Quantum Rebirth as an integration process, not to teach manifestation, but to help the body and identity fully transition into this new operating system. Alongside it, the Quantum Grimoire exists as a practical companion, offering grounded rituals, reflections, and recalibration tools that support coherence in real life, not just during meditation. You'll find more about both in the pinned comment whenever it feels aligned to explore. But regardless of what you choose next, remember this. Manifestation does not become automatic because the universe changes its rules for you. It becomes automatic because you finally stop operating from a level where effort was required. When the body leaves the past, when the mind leaves the future, and when identity rests in coherence, reality has nothing left to resist. And at that level, creation is no longer something you do. It's something that happens naturally because you are finally in the right place internally for it to respond.